Hi everybody, thanks for joining us today for the first talk in the Revive series. I'm Anna, I'm co-founder of Isla, and we're absolutely delighted to be joined today by Jonathan Wise, who is one of the co-founders of the Purpose Disruptors.
Thanks very much, Anna. Hi everybody, as Anna says, I'm Jonathan Wise. I'm one of the co-founders of this organisation called the Purpose Disruptors, and our vision is such that the ads industry in the UK and globally only works on brands that promote sustainable lifestyles consummate with a kind of net zero world. So what I'm going to do is talk about change the brief, as Anna suggests. So just a bit of context before I kind of just talk a little bit about what change the brief is and how you might be able to apply it within your work. So this is a photo taken Australian fires. So we are in a climate emergency, as I'm sure many of you know. And I guess the question is, as mature adults, what are we going to do to help? And the IPCC back in 2018 says that we need to help and it's urgent. And to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees means we need far-reaching, rapid and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. And that's all aspects. So advertising, events, everywhere, we all need to change. And if you look at the sort of the data, so this is data. So from the sort of birth of consumerism in 1945, you see the black line and the ascent of the CO2 emissions that we've made as a global society. And if you look at the black line where it finishes in 2020, then you can see the sharpness of the handbrake turn and the steepness of the descent in order for us to achieve net zero emissions. So to basically put virtually no emissions into the atmosphere to keep us below 1.5 degrees. So rapid turn, hard and fast is required. And so, I mean, quite simply, we're going to have to change whether we like it or not. And so do we, as mature adults, make the changes that we need in our lives and work to kind of become something more on the left-hand side, a kind of sustainable green society and kind of live in harmony with all life on Earth? Or do we let the thing on the right happen, which is a prediction of what London's going to look like when the Thames flood barrier is breached as a consequence of sea level rise? So we're going to be living more sustainably through choice, or it's forced upon us. And so I guess the point then becomes kind of, what are we going to do to make that choice? And what's fantastic, as many of you may well know, that there's the climate change conference in Glasgow this November, COP26. And as part of that, there's a thing called Race to Zero that we're working with as Purpose Disruptors. So many clients are moving in this direction. So the Race to Zero is a coalition, as it says there, of over 400 cities, over 1,000 businesses. So many people across the kind of like the landscape of society, and many people that run businesses and host events are committing to a race to zero. So they're looking for help in how they achieve this. They're choosing to act. And the question then is, how can we help? What's our role? What's our agency within the requirement for us to make the changes that are needed? What's our point of influence? And within advertising and consistent with events is this idea of the brief. So obviously you receive, or we all receive, kind of the client's needs, what they want from the work that you will do on their behalf. And that forms the kind of the nature of the briefing document. And then the creative response is what you kind of put forward as a consequence of that. And we've understood that in the advertising industry, this point of influence, this point of leverage is something really important. And so Change the Brief is a kind of training and learning community that we're building within the marketing and communications industry, which is an action-focused initiative to promote sustainable lifestyles towards this net zero world through the content and communications that we provide and produce. So just to kind of bring that to life a little bit. So if you're receiving a brief from a client, whatever that might be, how can you provide a response to that brief, which enables people in the communications in the event to eat better, to buy better, to travel better, to use less, to waste less, and protect nature, for example. So just to kind of get a couple of examples. So for example, if you were Tesco's and client comes in and says, you're the agency for Tesco's, and they say, right, we want to sell more food at Father's Day. So the normal response, the historic response, might have been that you might try and encourage, people to buy roast beef, because roast beef is a kind of celebration of masculinity, a good manliness, and that's what you should be serving up on Father's Day. Through the lens of Change the Brief, we understand that kind of the shift from high carbon red meat needs to move towards plant-based. So rather than promoting roast beef as a celebration of masculinity, why don't we change the brief and encourage communications where the plant-based option is a kind of a celebration of a loving father, because plant-based is a way to show that you'll care about the future of your kind of sons and daughter as a father. So that's just one way of like changing the brief. So we're understanding what the client wants, which is to sell more food at Father's Day. So we're meeting that. The numbers will still be high in terms of sales, but we're just redirecting what is sold so it meets what the planet needs, and meets what the audience needs, and meets what the client needs. So that's under Eat Better. Similarly, under, say, Travel Better, if you're Massive Attack and you're hosting concerts, so we know Massive Attack, kind of with the Bristol vibe, are quite keen on reducing their carbon footprint. So the normal response, if they're trying to reduce their carbon footprint, and they're kind of the purview of most kind of concerts or pop bands or bands, would be the impact of our carbon footprint is on us. So let's reduce the number of, for example, international concerts. So the amount of flying that we do as a team with all the roadies and the crew to be able to kind of reduce our carbon footprint. But under the guise of kind of Change the Brief, why don't we open the scope, open our understanding to take full responsibility for the carbon footprint we create? And this is what Massive Attack have been doing. They understand that the majority of the footprint associated with their concerts isn't actually in them, in the flying. It's actually in the audience and the tens of thousands of people that come to their concerts, and how they get to the concerts. And so the new response under Change the Brief would basically be, okay, we need to not just reduce the impact that we create, but actually reduce the impact for the audience generates. So, for example, can we work with the local council and bus companies to provide mass transit to the concerts rather than people turning up in individual cars? So it's just one way, again, that you can kind of change the brief. And so I guess, our vision, as I say, is like to transition the advertising and marketing communications industry to only promote attitudes, lifestyles, behaviours and brands aligned to the net zero world by 2030. And we, as Anna kindly says, we're getting quite a lot of traction with that, and Change the Brief is a key pillar of that. I guess for the events industry, what would be the equivalent? How can you help transition the industry so it only promotes attitudes, lifestyles and behaviours and brands across the way in which you respond to what's required, so it's aligned with the net zero world by 2030. So how can you use your creativity to change the brief? And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us today. It's been brilliant. And for everybody who's dialed in, thank you so much for taking part. Our next session is in 2 weeks' time, same place. We'll be hearing from Rachel Russell from GPJ, who will be sharing her top 10 tips for kickstarting the conversation with clients, team, and within the organisation. So do join us again then. But thank you so much, everybody. And we'll join you again soon.